You join me here today on a Nissan Qashqai, and I am going to replace the outer track rod end on this car, and I'm going to begin by removing the wheel. Essentially, this process starts with only two nuts actually, sorry. We have this one here, which is the outer tie rod end nut, which holds the nut into the steering knuckle, which is here. And then we also have, if you follow it down, we also have this nut here, which holds it onto the inner steering rack, and then there's a thread here. These get unbelievably rusted, and I will show you that close up. So for the outer tie rod end ball joint, you can see here that the threads are quite corroded. They're basically just full of rubbish. So the threads just here behind the nut, this is basically this nut here, you need to break it loose towards these threads. So you have to clean these up. You can see how disgusting they are. If we tried to break this loose now with no heat, without cleaning up the threads and with no lubricant, you would almost certainly just jam the nut exactly in place, round off this whole thing, and then you would create yourself a whole it would be a real big problem. So instead, to avoid all of that, we're going to clean up the threads, lubricate them. We're going to attempt to break it loose without heat and see how that goes. I'm going to start with this outer track rod end. I'm just going to lightly douse that with lubricant, and I'm going to wire wheel it. So this is a 17. I want to break that loose. I want to continue winding that off. So in this instance, I am using the impact wrench just for speed. So basically, watch this. You can hear not much resistance, and the nut is still not off. So what is happening here is the nut is spinning, but it is caught on this stud here, and the whole thing is spinning. So no matter how long you keep winding it, it won't come out. So to resolve that, what we're going to do is we're going to apply some weight underneath with the jack, right underneath the tie rod. There we go. And now it should just come straight off. Hear the difference? There we go. You could hear the difference, couldn't you, between it just spinning and between it actually impacting. So that's it there. Obviously it will be slower, but you can do the same thing with a ratchet. In my case, this thing here, just the ball joint itself just fell out of the knuckle, but sometimes you have to break it loose. What I would recommend is hit it here. So you hit it on the casting itself and just keep smacking it, and eventually, well, not if you have a jack underneath, but obviously if you don't have a jack underneath, keep hitting this and eventually the ball joint will drop out. Something like this. Oh. It's going to fight me now. There we go. See how it dropped? That's essentially what you have to do. So you just give it a couple of taps and out she comes. So you've broken this here loose now, which is great. Good job. Now just thread the nut back on a few turns and then leave it on there. So this is the inner section of the tie rod, and this section here will always start with spraying it down and giving it a good clean. You can see how much rubbish here is in the threads. We do not want to try and break it loose with that in there, so we'll give that a little bit of WD-40 and then a wire wheel. little bit more lubricant. So some of these threads here have actually rusted away. That can be a problem, but we're going to try and break it loose anyway. Now what I recommend for breaking these loose instead of a spanner is, this is called a crow's foot wrench. On this particular car, this Qashqai, it is a 22mm. So I'm showing you this from back here, hopefully to show you the full process. We've got a 22mm crow's foot, so we'll get that on there. Slip that on there like that, and then I've got this ratchet with a load of extensions on it. And now we'll just try and break it loose. So you can see it moves first, just here, because obviously it's slightly loose. There we go. So that is enough. You can see the whole rack on the inside there moved. Do not keep turning it, because what you're actually doing is turning the inside rack. So the best thing to do now is undo this, which should only be hand tight. And now you can wind off this usually. Sometimes you might need a pair of grips to get it going, but that's it. Charlie, please. I'm trying to make a video. Oh my goodness. I'm looking after my dad's dogs at the moment, and my dad has a little Shih Tzu. And he is the one that you can hear making all that noise. Okay, so upon refitting, it is quite simple. Grab your new tie rod end and just wind it over, like so. All the way up to the jam nut, which is where you break it loose from. If you wind it off a lot, obviously you have to remember the orientation, but generally speaking, once you reach it, you just have to turn it until it's facing upwards, like so. And then all I do is put it in the knuckle and then tighten up this nut here on top. That will do it relatively well. However, you will always need an alignment after you've done something like this, because the ball joint will be different in your new one to your old one. So if your old one had a lot of slop, your alignment will reflect that. If this one here is very, very stiff, your alignment again will reflect that. This car here has also recently had some new drop links, not by me. That will also slightly affect your alignment. I'm also doing a spring on the other side of this, which will also affect the alignment, which, I mean, basically this car will definitely need to go in, and I don't do alignments because I don't have the machinery for it. I say machinery, the tooling for it rather, but you know, it will have to go into town basically to have that done. Just want to get that into there like that. There we go. So we'll just do this part here up finger tight for now. Obviously it won't go past the nylock nut. That will need something extra. Before we go any further, we will just tighten that down there. So I'm just going to snug this. I don't have a torque spec for it, so I'm just going to do it up as much as I can, within reason, that is. These aren't super tight anyway, so besides all that corrosion will stop it from coming loose. So now all we need to do is tighten down this here. So this nut here, so this nut here is done down to 34.4 Newton meters apparently. I'm just going to bring that up relatively tight. Okay, that should do. I've just set mine for 35. Why split the difference? I'm just going to tighten it the rest of the way by hand until I get that sweet click. I hate to over tighten things. I also hate not to tighten things enough, so that is why I enjoy talking things down, but I don't hold anything against somebody that doesn't torque it down. There we go, that's it, done. That is torqued to spec. I do have a torque spec for this inside one, but I'm not going to give it to you because I don't find it to be reliable. Because of all the corrosion here, I find that sometimes you think it's tight and then it's not, and you drive along and it creates problems. I would just tighten this down until you know that it's tight. it's hard to say, man. Don't go ridiculous. I mean, if you round it off, obviously you're a muppet, but just do your best, be sensible. Somebody has been here relatively recently, because we can see there's tons of copper grease on the axle. So we're just going to clean up the corrosion, ready for the wheel to go back on. When it comes to wheel nuts, we have one specific instruction. Lubricate the conical part, which is basically this, well, what you would call a rebate from a flat surface. It is basically from the peak of the ridge down to the bottom of the ridge, where the thread of the nut, where the hex of the socket will start. And do not lubricate the threads, which is that inside bit there that you can see, which is silver. Very important. Do not lubricate the threads. And now we refit the wheel. Not the heaviest wheel, not exactly the lightest either. Just get all of these started, shall we? So there you have it. All that you strictly speaking need is a jack, a 17mm socket, and a 22mm spanner or crow's foot wrench like I used, and that's pretty much it. You know, with that, a wire brush and some WD-40, you can get this job done at home. So if you give this job a shot, let me know how you get on. Be interested to see if you've got any other little comments, criticisms, anything that helped you out, things that you ran into that I didn't on this particular car, because that can happen. Mine didn't seem to be that badly seized on, but like for example that lock nut on the back side of that might be as tough as heck for you. So if you found something that helped, by all means put a comment down and help somebody else out. Bonus footage at the end. If you noticed that I put the left hand on the right hand side, gold star for you. Thankfully, this is a relatively quick job and it's not a pain to swap it over. This is the kind of nonsense I always do when I'm filming.